Good evening, everyone. We are back with Deuteronomy Chapter 3. Now, in these few chapters at the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy is a recollection of the events that's happened, and you would find that some of these events speak all the way back to the entire episode of the life of Moses as well, and we will see that when we come to the end of chapter 3. And so this would be a recap and very much to give the new generation of the children of Israel a bird's eye view of all the things that's happened, and they are supposed to be paying attention to the commands of God. Now, I would like to bring you back again to the map. I think yesterday's map wasn't as clear as I wanted it to be. So allow me to share with you the map again. Now, using this map, I want to bring your attention to the fact that this is Edom right down here, and Petra would be further down. Now, the interesting thing is that they didn't pass through Edom in Numbers 21, and they had to go around Edom. And what is going to happen is right above Edom would be Moab, and it would then the next one would be Ammon. The current city called Amman is most likely the ancient capital of Ammon. And then further up would be I would think would be the Amorites. This would be the Amorite territory. And here would be Bashan. One other place that I would like to point out to you is that this area here is called Gilead. And here we would have the Galilee. And this would be the Salt Sea. And this entire region down here in this line would be the Jordan. Now, we don't know exactly the boundaries of everything, but what we do know is that we all need to be very familiar with these locations. Now, right here are highlands, right? These are all highlands. They are all highlands, and this borders the Salt Sea. And these are all highlands as well, as you can tell, right? Now, what is the lowlands would be down here in this particular green area right here. These are all the lowland, and this is called the Jordanian Rift. And this entire area here is actually a brick of the ground, and the deeper side would have the water containment, and hence we have the Lake of Galilee, and then the Jordan River flows into what we call the Salt Sea. I believe the Salt Sea was far bigger in the good old days of Abraham. Now, just a little recap is this: the area where the Israelites traversed would be this way, around Edom. And it might be even further out, but I just give you an indication. Pass through Moab. They're not supposed to touch Moab and not supposed to touch Ammon. And when it came to the Amorite, that's where the wars began. God gave them the king of Sihon of the Amorites. And today we will look at Bashan. And these areas would be the areas that God has given to them. Right? All these areas, but not Ammon, Moab, and Edom, because these are brethren God has given to these people as an inheritance before. And the Israelites are supposed to take these areas and then cross the Jordan and then take these areas as well later. And so understand that this is the general topography as we moved upward northwards. We don't know exactly where the boundaries are, but it's just to help us have a better picture. And so let us begin chapter 3. Now, after they have taken Sihon, or the land of the Amorites, that's very important because God did not give them the land of Edom. Edom took over from the Horites, and then the Moab, the land of Moab wasn't given to the Israelites because God gave that land to the Moabites, who took over from the Emims, and then they went up further north, another relative, the Ammons or the Ammonites, and they took over from the Zamzumims, and then they went further up north, and then they encountered the Amorites. Now, we left the Amorites at the end of chapter 1, and if you go back to Genesis chapter 14, let me write it down. Genesis chapter 14, and in verse 5, you read some of these Rephaims as well. Now, one of the Rephaims that were left over from those fights was the king of Bashan, who is Og. And so at this point in time, they turned and then went up. Now, notice this word went up is ascend. The land that is around the Galilee region on the eastern side are very mountainous. And so it would be a picture of going up after the fights with the Amorites. And so the road to Bashan, and King Og, right, of Bashan came out against us, all his people, to battle at Edrei, right? This word is Edrei. And the Lord said to me, do not fear him. The word fear him is to cause yourself to be afraid, right? Do not be afraid of him. Why? Now, every time God tells them not to be afraid at war, is because God says, I have delivered him, all his people, and his land into your hand. What do you mean by deliver? The word deliver is to give. That's a very simple word. I have given. And when God says he has given, it is not wrapped up in a bow. Right? It's not a modern day concept of a present. It literally means God has given permission to take over this land so that they can inherit it and possess it. So yesterday we saw that they took over as a beginning of the inheritance, and the possession of that inheritance God gave to them, called the promised land, would be the land of the Amorites. Now moving further north, this would be the land of Bashan. And so you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt at Heshbon. And so the Lord our God also gave into our hands Og, king of Bashan, with all his people. And verse 3 says, we attacked him. The idea of attack is to strike. And so in a time of war, it is to charge at him. And so attack it's okay. But just understand that it uses the very, very vivid imagery of going to hit on them, right? Until he had no survivors remaining. Now, these words are important. The idea here is no exception. None, and with no exception, right? No exception. That there is anyone remaining, and the word remaining is left behind. No remnant, if you want to call it, right? No remnant. And survivors would be, I think it's a good word for us to use. Survivor would be a remnant who is living. And so this picture here is the same picture as with Sihon. Now, you know that the ancient way of taking over a land or dispossessing somebody of a land. So we read of it in about Edom yesterday with the Horites. And then in the land of the Rephaim, Moab took over the land where they were the Emims. And then the Ammonites took over the land that was the Zamzumims. And then God says, well, all these lands don't touch. And then they went up to take over Sihon, right? Sihon, and now Bashan. That's exactly the same pattern. Leave no survivor so that there will be nobody to defeat them later on. And so we took all his cities, not a city which we did not take from them, 60 cities. Now understand, cities are not like our cities, right? In the way that they lived in the old days are very similar to medieval times. There will be walled major cities, and there will be cities without walls, meaning cities that are general farmland, right? In the area of Argoth, the kingdom of Og in Bashan, all the way up north. Remember where is Bashan? Bashan is in today's Golan Heights area, which is the eastern shore or the northeast shore and further of the northeast shore of the Galilee. All these cities were fortified with high walls, gates, and bars, which means that these cities were defended cities. Defended cities means that they are well defended, well fortified, and they are real seasoned armies. And yet God gave it to them. When it says God gave it or delivered to our hands, God gave them the ability to take over, which means that they had the ability, and with God with them, God enabled them in abnormal or what we will call supernatural ways, that out of whatever they possess, they were able to defeat people in high walls, gates, and bars, besides a great many rural towns. Now in verse 5, rural towns is not our idea of rural. Rural would be, I guess, what we would call countryside towns, right? Means towns without walls. And so we utterly destroyed them. Now the word destroyed here again in verse 6 literally means haram, which we read in the prophet books. This is about violence, about taking over, to destroy. So this is a good word, to exterminate. And this is a repeat as what we did to Sihon, king of Heshbon, utterly destroying the men, women, children of every city. But they kept the livestock and the spoils of the city as booty. Remember, this is how they fought wars those days. And if they were to take over, then they will occupy the land without the previous generations there. Verse 8, and at that time we took the land from the two kings of the Amorites who were on this side of the Jordan. And by this side, it would be the east. Everything we read in the book of Deuteronomy at this stage always speaks of the east. Why? Because remember, Moses had said that he was not allowed to cross the Jordan to look at the good land. And so everything in the beginning of this possession of the promised land is on the eastern side of the Jordan. From the river Arnon to Mount Hermon. Now, Mount Hermon is way up north, further north from the Galilee. And Mount Hermon is actually the tallest mountain in the entire range. And the Amorites call it Senir, and the Sidonians call it Sirion. And all the cities in the plain, all Gilead, all Bashan, as far as Salcah and Edrei, the cities of Og in Bashan. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained as a remnant of not the giants, as we saw yesterday, the Rephaim. Indeed, his bed was an iron bed. Is it not in Rabbah of the people of Ammon, that it is 9 cubits in length and 4 cubits width, according to the standard cubit. Now, the standard cubit could be anything between 17 and 20 inches. So if you use 17, then it will be 9 times 17. And that will be 63, 153 inches, right? 153 inches. Divide by 12, you would get more than 10 feet, right? More than 10 feet. So we would notice that Og is an abnormal king. Now, would that be abnormal? You would find that one of the emperor of Rome was over 8 feet tall. He was huge, right? So there is some truth in the sense that when someone is big and tall, they exude certain fear in people. And so many of these are big, strong, tall leaders. And so King Og is one of them. Once the eastern side was conquered, then in this land which we possess at the time, we possess also mean dispossessed from the original people, from Aroer, which is by the river Arnon, half the mountains of Gilead and its cities, I gave to the Reubenites and the Gadites. So 2 tribes, Reuben and Gad, had this piece of land on the eastern side, which is below the Galilee. The rest of Gilead and all Bashan, which is northern side, which will be given to half the tribe of Manasseh. And that would be the land of the Rephaim, which is Og. And so gave it to Yair, the son of Manasseh, took all the region of Argob as far as the borders of the Geshurites and the Maachatites, right? Maachatites, called Bashan after his own name, Havot Yair, to this day. Now, the southern side of this piece of land would be the northern part of Gilead to Machir, who is also the eldest son, right? One of the sons of Manasseh. And then the rest of Gilead to Reuben and Gad, as far as the river Arnon, and it just borders the Ammonites. That's all. And so whatever north of Ammon would be Reuben and Gad, and then above that would be Manasseh, which is actually half the tribe. The plain also with Jordan as the border from Kinnereth as far as the east sea of the Arabah which is the Salt Sea, below the slopes of Pisgah. The slopes of Pisgah is important. And the word Pisgah in verse 17. Now in verse 17, Pisgah is on the eastern side of the Jordan. And it literally means a cleft, or, well, yeah, I guess a cleft or a passing. Maybe a cleft is good, right? A cleft, which is mountainous. And that was the place where Moses had an engagement with God one more time. In verse 18, then I commanded you at that time, saying, the Lord your God. See, every time Moses says, the Lord your God said this, Moses never said, I told you this. Moses always said, when I command you, it is the Lord your God who is saying that has given you this land to possess. Now, verse 18 is the beginning of this process of inheritance. Gave to you, it is essentially the same words that we read up front, that God has given the land. All right. So the word given is literally to give permission to take. I think that would be a better way of explaining it. I know we all think of giving as like something wrapped in a present and it was handed over to them, but it was not handed over to them. God has given permission. And as God has given permission, God has also given the ability to do it, which the first generation refused to enter. Now this generation has done it. So it was at that time, and now verse 18 is now to tell them something very important. Look at this word, you. And I want us to be very careful with this word, you, and who is Moses now talking to? Say, the Lord your God has given you this land to possess. Who would you be, and what land were we talking about? And this land that we're talking about was to half of Manasseh, and then to Reuben, and then to Gad, right? And so what is the purpose of verses 18 to 21 is this. Moses is now saying, now that the land belongs to you because we have conquered it together as an entire army, Moses is now saying, all of you men of valor, and every time you see the men of valor, men who can go to war, would be 20 years and above. From this part of Manasseh, which is from Yair and Machir, of Reuben and Gad, you cannot stay in your land yet because the entire inheritance have not been completed. And so all of you must join to cross over armed before your brethren, the children of Israel, the rest of them who has not gotten their land. But your wives, your little ones, your livestock, and I know you have much livestock, shall stay in your cities which I have given you. All of them, from the Amorites, the Gilead, the Bashan, all the way up to Mount Hermon. And that's given. That's given. Half Manasseh, Reuben, and Gad. But you, men of valor, as the army of Israel must go together. And the men must fight together until everyone has gotten their land. until the Lord has given rest to your brethren as to you. Now, what do you mean by rest? In verse 20, it means this: until the Lord has settled. I think that would be a good word. It is to cause to sit. All right? Cause to rest. Cause to remain. What else is cause to? Yep. Cause to remain, cause to rest, cause to be quiet. And so given rest means all your brethren. So whenever you read the word brethren in here, that would be your brothers. So let me use a different color here, your brothers. Who are your brothers? They are part of the 12 tribes. All the brothers are part of the 12 tribes, right? So when the rest of the 12 tribes have gotten their land, just like you have, so that your wives, little ones, and your livestock can live in them, then they also can possess the land which the Lord your God is giving them beyond the Jordan. So remember, is giving means haven't given, because Moses is still speaking on the eastern shore of the Jordan. When will God give them? When they cross the Jordan in the book of Joshua. Then each of you may return to his inheritance which I have given you, which means that they can then return to their wives, little ones, and their livestock after the completion in the book of Joshua as what we call the conquest. This is stage 1 of the conquest, the land of the Amorites, the land of Bashan. The second conquest is done by Joshua crossing the river Jordan. And we would read that in the book of Joshua. So verse 21 says, and I commanded Joshua. You be interested to know the name Joshua is Yahoshua. Yahoshua, meaning Yah is our salvation, right? Yah is our salvation or deliverance. And this is such an apt name, I guess, when Joshua is going to lead them with God before them, giving them the land. So remember, giving means giving them the ability as long as they obey God. And so Joshua is not divine, right? Joshua is one of the young men who went into the promised land as a spy and came back with Caleb, who encouraged them to go and possess the land, which they decided not to. And so Joshua is now being commanded by who? Moshe, right? Moshe, Moses. And Joshua or Yehoshua, in short, his name is called Yeshua in short. And so I commanded at that time, saying, your eyes have seen all that the Lord God has done to these two kings. Who are the two kings? The Amorite and Bashan. Now, one of the things that I think we need to pay attention to is this. Your eyes have seen all. Remember, in the Hebrew concept, everything is very vivid. It is not you have imagined, you just believe. No, Moses never said that. Moses says, your eyes, literally, your eyes have seen. So the ayin, the eyes is important. You have seen, you have perceived, you have observed, right? And you have experienced it. You have seen everything that the Lord, your God, has done. See, God did something that can be seen. And when you can see it, and that's the Hebrew aspect, they went to fight two kings, which I would say in a normal person's mind would be way beyond them, because they had fortified cities. They were seasoned soldiers. They had walled cities. They have armies. They are gated. They guarded. And yet they won. And they won in a way where they could exterminate and clear the ground so that the half tribe of Manasseh and Gad and Reuben could occupy that land in peace. This is important because this is also the instructions given to the Israelites when they crossed the Jordan. But later we see they didn't quite do what they did with Moses. All right. And so with Joshua, he has seen, right? He has seen what God has done. And so will the Lord do to all the kingdoms through which you pass when you cross over to the Jordan. And the most important thing here is you must not fear them, for the Lord your God himself fights for you. So let's break this down in verse 22. So you must not be afraid. As Moses was not afraid, right? Do not be afraid of them. The same word, this word is from the word yare, which is usually used, right? Usually used. Fear God, but don't fear all these other kingdoms, but fear God. And then these other kingdoms, don't fear, but fear God. So it's the same word. Why do you fear God? Fear God so that you listen to God and do exactly as he says. And don't fear the kingdoms, because whatever they do to you or tell you, you don't follow. Why are they so gung-ho with that? Because God himself fights for you. And what does that mean? It means that God himself is going to engage in war. And that is important. It's not that God is going to send fire from heaven and all of them just stand around and watch. Right? So when it says God himself will fight for you or fights for you, it means that when you eventually get across the Jordan, God is going to pave the way exactly how they would fight enemies far greater than them. When God says, I've given into your hands, then they will win the war as long as they trust God. Like the Amorites, King Sihon, like the Bashan, King Og, that they never can do it themselves, but with God with them, they win the war. And that is what God is telling Joshua. Trust God. That is how the wars will be won. Now we come to the last part here in chapter 3. And this is what I would call a parenthesis. It doesn't talk anymore about the possession or the dispossession of the inheritance of the land, because they have already taken it at this point in time. And then I is Moses. Remember, when Moses struck the rock, when God said, speak to the rock and water will come out, this is the second time about water from the rock. Moses got angry and struck the rock twice. That is the crucial thing that we have to understand, that God will not, right? God will not let him see the promised land. And so I think this is something which we need to pay attention to at this stage. I pleaded. In verse 23, the word plead is Hanan. And in this case, I think here, how should I explain this? It is to implore, right? It is to seek grace or favor. This is the word. You see, in the Hebrew concept, in order to receive favor from the one in power, like Esther, she has to seek grace in the eyes of the king. And so now Moses is trying to seek favor or grace in the eyes of God to ask for a favor. So grace and favor is the same word, right? Chen. And so Hanan is to seek grace with God. And so he is asking God a favor. And what is that favor? He says, "Oh Lord God, you have just begun." Now, this word begun is with regards to the beginning of the conquest of inheritance. So you have just begun to show. To show means to cause to see. That now Moses can see the real power of God, not in the wanderings in the wilderness, but in the conquests of the promised land on the eastern side of the Jordan. That your servant have seen what? Your greatness. Greatness here means the magnitude. The magnitude of strength, right? I would use strength, right? And your mighty hand. This would be the Chazak, right? Remember, Hezekiah. This is the word Chazak, right? Chazak. Mighty hand. And so Hezekiah is a mighty God. And so this is the word Chazak. And these two are an A and B. Remember, your greatness and your mighty hand. This is an A and B, as we can see, because it speaks of the same thing. It shows the power of God. That what God, in this case, who is that El? Now, remember, heaven, earth. Heaven, earth. Shamayim, Shamayim. And earth, Aretz. And this is always the pair, like Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This is the same two words because it's always coming in a pair. You look up, you look down. And in this entire world, that maybe that's one way of saying it in the Hebrew sense, who can do anything like what you have done and your mighty deeds? Everything that Moses have seen, no El can do. That is the way that Moses is expressing this. And so he says in verse 25, this word, I pray, it is a very humble plea. It's a humble plea. I pray, I ask, I humbly entreat you, God. And what was he asking? And then he said this. Let me cross over. Now, again, I mentioned this to you. Cross over is ever, which is the same word as Hebrew, people who cross over, right? And so in the early days of Abraham, they crossed over from the Euphrates River, the great river. And now the Israelites eventually will cross over the Jordan to the western shore. So that's the concept of crossover. And Moses says, I want to cross over. I want to see, literally see with his eyes. What? The good land. Now, this good land, remember the word good is tova. The good things, right, of the land beyond the Jordan, meaning across, over the other side of the Jordan, opposite the Jordan. That's what it means, right? Which is the idea of crossover. And those pleasant mountains, and the mountains, then pleasant is also the word tov, and which is on the other side of the shore. He can only see, he can only glimpse from here. And Lebanon is north of Dan, right? And on all the way north, and Lebanon is really a beautiful place. And this was what Moses was asking for. In verse 26, the Lord was angry with me. The Lord was, how should we say? The Lord was angry. And what do you mean by angry? The idea here of angry means, I think the word here, actually the word angry is not the regular angry, which is the nose. This word angry is about passing over. And I would think this would imply ignore. And that's how Moses was feeling. God ignored his plea on your account, because of you all, because of you, Israelite. And he would not listen to me. He would not shama me. Listen is shama, right? He would not hear me. So all this plea with God, I pray humbly, God just ignored Moses. So the Lord said to me, enough of that. What do you mean, enough of that? The idea is, don't say anymore. I think that would be an A and a B, right? Enough of that is, don't say anymore. Then it says in the second part, is don't speak of this davar, of this incident, right? This matter. This is davar. And so this is an A and a B, with the emphasis of don't talk about it. God says, I don't want to talk about it anymore. So now in verse 27, and we will see later, I want to go to Deuteronomy 34 because we will not be studying all the way there. And then we'll take a quick look and then we will end. It says, go up to the top of Pisgah and lift your eyes toward the west, the north, the south, and the east. And behold it with your eyes, for you shall not cross over this Jordan. And that would be the river. But command Joshua, encourage him, strengthen him. These are very important words. And the word encourage him is to make strong, right? To restore strength. Literally, encouraging means to give him back the strength by saying words to implore him to move forward. The next word here is strengthen. And the word strengthen here is amatz. Amatz means to be brave, to be courageous. And both of this you can also see is an A and a B, right? To strengthen him means to be bold, so that he is not afraid to move forward. For he shall go over before this people in front. He is going to be the lead, and he shall cause them to possess the land which you will see. And we'll take a look at this. So we stayed in the valley opposite Bet Peor, right? Bet Peor. Now, this is the end of chapter 3, and I want to skip all the way to chapter 34, and then we will end there. When we read chapter 3, it spoke of the end. So you remember when I said that chapters 1, 2, and 3, as we go along, it's giving the broad strokes. It's telling about the entire life that spans the entire life of Moses. And it speaks of the time when, and then after Moses dies, he commissions Joshua to do that. And the details of those incidents is now in chapter 34. So this is the last stage of Moses' life. Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, right? Mount Nebo. In chapter 34, and 34 is actually the last chapter. And this is important. We pronounce this as Nevo, right? This is a vet for the B. To the top of Pisgah. So we read about Pisgah, which are the mountains, which is across from Jericho. Now, if we remember, this was how I had drawn it yesterday. And this would be the Salt Sea. This is Jordan. And Pisgah is here. And Nebo, or Nevo, is most likely the highest peak. Right? Most likely the highest peak. I think that's how we would look at it. Now, the present-day Mount Nebo, we don't really know that's the real place, but that's basically looking at the same place that God has brought him up, likely to be the highest peak. All right? And so very quickly, I want to complete this passage. The Lord showed him all the land of Gilead. Remember, it was given to half tribe of Manasseh, which is to Machir, the descendants of Machir, and then was given to Dan and Reuben. As far as Dan, and this would be a much later reference, Dan was not at this point in time north. And this we have to pay attention, because Dan was only moving north in a much later time, when they could not conquer and take care of their own land. And so they had to move further north beyond what everybody had. And then all Naphtali in the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, which is on the, well, if you were up in Mount Nebo, it would be on the right-hand side, which is on the eastern shore, right? And then across the Jordan, the western shore would be Naphtali, Ephraim, and Manasseh. All the land of Yehudah, which is across directly as far as the western sea. Now understand this. The Western Sea is called the Sea at the back. And the word west means at the back. Now, what do you mean at the back? The Hebrew people always look east. Today, our compass is north, right? But the Hebrew people is always east. So the back of the person is the sea. And that is where we get the Western Sea. And then he looks south, which is his left, and the plain of the valley of Jericho, which is on the eastern side across the Jordan, which is a plain, the valley, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar, which is the south of the Salt Sea, which is also the Dead Sea. Those days, they don't call it the Dead Sea, they call it the Salt Sea. And then the Lord said to him, this is the land which I promised to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to your descendants, and I have caused you to see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there. And so God says, let's not talk about crossing. That's out of the table, off the table. But yes, to see it is very important. And so God let him see. So it's very visual in Hebrew, right? Now, right in verse 7, you just understand this. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, nor his natural vigor diminished. He could see much better than all of us. In not so many words, God is describing the vision of Moses as quite 2020. And he could see all the way up north to the Galilee and all the way south of the Salt Sea. And that means he's got eagle eyes. He could see all the way to the Western Sea, which is what we call the Mediterranean Sea today. And so it is an incredible height. So from Mount Nebo, he could see all this. And that was the thing that God said, since you asked to see it, I will let you see, but you can't cross. And so let's not talk about that. And so God honored Moses that he could eventually see the good land that God is giving. He had part in the phase 1 of the inheritance, remember? The Amorite land and the Bashan land. But he can't do the rest, and it has to be with Joshua. And that would be our end of chapter 3.